More than 4 million people have now been killed by the coronavirus worldwide. Africa in particular is currently being pummeled by it. On that continent, only 4 vaccine doses have been administered per 100 people. And Tokyo, where Olympic opening ceremonies are set to start in 12 days, has declared a COVID state of emergency and announced that spectators will not be allowed at the Games. Devi, let me start with you and ask what seems to me to be the big news story here in a pandemic that we thought was sort of winding down, and certainly in the United States, we've entered a post-pandemic world, which is this Delta variant. It was detected in India last year. It is now in 96 countries. Half the new cases in the United States are the Delta variant. What should we know about this?
Yeah, so the Delta variant is going to become the dominant strain across the world. If we can look at what's happening in Britain right now, it went from being a small percentage of cases to being the majority of the cases that we're finding. And unfortunately, it is more transmissible, which means it is harder to suppress using the same, policies that we used in the past. In some ways, the challenge has become even greater in terms of reducing mixing, trying to stop the cases exploding. On the positive side, it looks like our vaccines are holding up, but 2 jabs are needed, 2 vaccination doses, not just 1. So it is challenging, but luckily the vaccines still work.
Tom, what I've heard is it's twice as transmissible. What does one need to know in terms of how dangerous is it?
Well, there are a few things that are really clear. First, it is at least twice as infectious as the original strain, and that means that we're going to have to get a higher level of immunity to stop explosive spread. But as Devi says, the vaccines work really well against it, though you probably need 2 doses of the mRNA, the 2-dose vaccines, in order to be fully protected. That's really important because that takes a month or 2 to kick in. So the sooner people get vaccinated, the better. Essentially, the fuse is shorter between when cases begin to spread and when you get explosive spread. We're already seeing increases in the United Kingdom and Israel, which have high levels of vaccination. In the United States, we are increasingly 2 countries divided under COVID. One largely vaccinated, which has very low rates and may see some increases, but probably not explosive. And the other has low vaccination rates, where we're already seeing doubling of cases week on week in some states, and inevitably those increases will continue, and we'll see them followed, sadly, by more hospitalizations and more deaths. That's why ramping up vaccination is crucially important. And as you say, in Africa, only 1.2% of people are fully vaccinated. That's totally unacceptable. We need to do a much better job, first, reallocating all available existing vaccines, and second, ramping up production as rapidly as possible so that we don't have 1 or 2 years of this devastating pandemic with not nearly enough vaccine production around the world.
So Delta will become the dominant variant, because basically what's happening is, because it's twice as infectious at least, that's the one that's spreading. Alpha is now dying. And so we end up with a more, so the pandemic is actually, in some senses, in the vast majority of the world that is unvaccinated, the pandemic is now twice as infectious as we thought it was. And of course, what I worry is, does that mean that the next variant could be twice as infectious as Delta?
Well, yeah, we don't know what's around the corner, and it's what we're seeing now with Delta makes the original wild type SARS-CoV-2 look much simpler to suppress and manage. So yes, I mean, there are going to be, I think, more transmissible variants coming in the future, and we have to prepare for that. The analogy for me is cars racing. The original one was 60 miles an hour, the next one, Alpha, was 90 miles an hour, then Delta comes along and it's 120 miles an hour. It's getting harder and harder, and the goalpost, as Tom said, where we have to get to in terms of vaccinating with the percent of the population to stop continual growth is getting, farther and farther away. It's not insurmountable, but it requires getting those doses to all parts of the world, having people continue with the difficult measures of distancing, of wearing face coverings when they're inside, of avoiding mixing, as well as using our testing as much as possible to find cases and break, chains of transmission whenever we can.